on this weird other platform outside of LinkedIn. Let me see. Yeah, I think we're streaming. Okay.
Hi.
Welcome, everybody. Hi. We can't see any of you, but we're assuming you're finding your way okay. I think we had over 50 people registered for our first non-promoted live event. I'm so excited to be doing this. I think it's a long time in the making. I've been intending to launch some kind of accessible forum where there's a feedback loop and we're bringing guests and some kind of podcast, but it was just not the right time until now. And I've decided to dedicate it to my audience on LinkedIn. So we're not even going to take this on Apple or Spotify at this point. It's literally just going to be live on the platform. And I'm so delighted to be welcoming our first ever guest of the season, Sarah Blackah. The reason why we're doing it a little bit late is because I'm in Mexico and she's in Australia. So with the UK in the mix, we're literally covering all time zones. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks, Beauty. I'm excited to be here, and I love this concept. I think it's like such a cool conversations to be having that give people a lot of like realness behind the scenes of navigating what it is to awaken. It's all the things.
Totally. I feel like there's so much activity happening on the internet, and different parts of us have communities, and we have our behind the scenes and we have our people, but people who are new to this world, or people who are on that journey, or people who are looking to creating conscious transformation and transitions in their lives don't necessarily know where to start always. Like, I had a few conversations this week, and there were so many beliefs around how when you leave an established part of society or corporate environment, you're left to your own devices, and that entrepreneurial can be really lonely. And there's definitely aspects of entrepreneurship that are testing, but I've never felt more supported and more in community than now. And I wanted to give people a sense of the identity of the people who've made it in this space and what it takes. And one of the reasons I asked you to come particularly, and we're opening with you, is because there's a level of death and rebirth in your own path that I've witnessed, and accompanying that, just so much courage to stay true to your desires and what you want and your truth, no matter how challenging or destructive things could have been up until this very moment. So do you want to introduce yourself before we dig into that statement?
To dig right in there. I mean, I love how, thank you for like the intro and seeing me in that way. Yeah, I mean, my background is that I've been, I guess, an entrepreneur for over 10 years now, as in left the corporate world where I was an executive coach and, ran large health and well-being programs within corporate organizations. And that's when I first started to see how really what mattered to people and what a life of purpose meant. And anyway, then I left corporate to kind of pursue that myself. And then over the last 10 years have built, large businesses, large communities, often centered around health and wellness, but also about creating freedom so that people really can live a life that is true to them. Because I saw that in my corporate days, when people were so bound up in a system and they weren't living true to themselves, that's where health issues, stress, family breakdowns, and everything would occur. So I really correlated people being on purpose and living a life true to them and authentic, which I know you talk about a lot, actually one of the biggest influences on health and wellness. And so that's been my last 10 years is really dedicated to, building businesses around that. And then in that journey, I've really, I would say, almost specialized in leadership and female leadership within that. And part of that is that you've got to walk the talk and you've got to follow your own truth. And it is challenging at times, and it can be lonely at times, and it can be all the things. But in order to be a guide for others, I would say that is my role now, is a guide for other leaders. You have to go first. You have to do the things, and that can take you in through many different seasons and chapters and identity shifts. And I think that's where the juicy deep work really begins.
Totally. I think leadership and entrepreneurship is such an inside out game, and some people get there earlier than others. But you've really been a pioneer and an example in having both. Like, you've achieved such massive success taking Healy to a certain level. You've traveled the world. You've been through heartbreak and business partnerships. You've like been on a massive love journey. You've invested in yourself countless times. If I asked you, what was a moment in your life when you realized you just couldn't keep living the way you were? Because I know, like, why don't you tell the audience about one of these deaths and one of these rebirths and like the signs that you had to shift things?
Yeah, I love that question. So, I mean, when I'm working with people, I often talk a lot about intuition, and like that's our superpower to be living an authentic life and in our leadership and creativity. And it's often a whisper, then it's a brick, and then it's a truck. And I'm sure if you're listening, you've had probably an experience of all three of those. And it does start like, most recently, it was probably about a year and a half ago now. I had our business was like blowing up, our community, like not blowing up in a good way. Like it was just like the speed of growth and success, and attracting incredible talent to our community. And it was, when you go through those phases where it's almost like hard to keep up, like it's got its own energy and momentum and you're just trying to kind of keep up with it. Mm-hmm. And I could hear this whisper of like, this isn't sustainable, like it needs to slow down. And like some of the people I was working with, I was starting to question some of the actions and they were taking and their integrity. And but because it was just moving, like we had to kind of move with it. But there was that whisper there. And then myself and a business partner and friend of 15 years and another leader, we were running this big 300-person leadership retreat in Portugal. And it was like the pinnacle event where all the cool top leaders in the industry, everyone was coming together to really celebrate the success that was and expand and take everything to another level. And, it was very fancy and it looked beautiful, and it was on a like full estate in Portugal, and the violinist is playing as everyone walks into this like fantastic, like full luxury experience. And it was just like one of those incredible kind of moments in time in some ways. But behind the scenes, I kind of knew the wheels were falling off. And so basically, long story short, after that event, my long-term friend and business partner actually launched a competing company off the back of that event, and kind of took some of my leaders and they signed NDAs, and it all like got promised the opportunity of a lifetime and shares and top of the company. And I actually was offered it all. But this is where the intuitive piece came in. I just knew in my heart of hearts, it was wrong. It was out of integrity. And anything born of seeds of manipulation, dishonesty, like it was all there. I could see all even though they were trying to paint it in a certain way, I could see the seeds that it was born from, and I knew it was never going to work, and it was never going to be something I wanted to be part of. And so I made the tough decision to end that friendship and business partnership, and lost a lot of close friends in the process. It was like a war between two communities, those that stayed, those that went. And it was a very tough time to navigate, both personally, because I was so impacted by it, but also I had to lead during that time, and I had to be solid and, guiding others through that experience. And this was a lot of people's livelihood, for their families. This was their hopes, their dreams. Like, it was quite a big deal. And there was a real death in that process. There was a death of friendships. There was a death of a dream that was like, it looked like it was just going to keep getting bigger and more beautiful. And it was a death to so many things I thought about who I was, beliefs I had. I had to die into that time and pray, and we get humbled in that time, but that's also where we get fortified. I could see the ways that some of these leaders I really almost put on pedestals a little bit, and that got taken that veil got lifted pretty quick. And there was a humbleness in that, but also that's a time when I think my leadership strengthened, because I stood up for what was true and right over what was popular and what was everyone else was doing. And so there were some beautiful gifts in that, despite it being very painful.
Yeah. I mean, it's so common for us to get tempted to more and better and prettier things on the outside, and yet we have this inner compass and this intuitive nudge, as you put it, to know the discerning difference between something that is true and right, like the highest frequency is the frequency of truth, and something that's going to be solid and we're going to feel good, versus house of cards built on smoke, right? Like, you might have it, the number of people who come to me with all the external achievements, like they've got it all, they've got the power and the money and the status and the relationships, and yet this emptiness inside, because they've self-abandoned again and again and again along the way. They've lost sense of who they even are. So it's to your credit, as difficult as that period must have been, that you were able to really do the hard thing and choose yourself. And what does that even mean? Like, you talked about beliefs. What beliefs did you have to destroy? What did you learn about yourself when you made those hard decisions?
I think I learned, a couple of things. I mean, when I say, I wouldn't even say it's like choosing myself, because in some ways, I think that gets, like choose yourself and everything. But I actually believe it's like our intuition is like, and when we're really tuning in, it's not just like what's best for us, but it's like I ask myself a lot, like, what serves the highest good? And that, for some people, that's God, or, like whatever it is that you connect to. But I think that tends to be not just what's best for the collective or the highest good, but it's also what's best for us, even though that might go beyond our own personal preferences and comforts and things like that. So I've learned, when you choose that, even though the human ego part of you is like, oh, but I'm losing my friends and I'm losing this and my business, and it's like, and you can't see how it is the greatest good at the time sometimes, but that's where your faith, like my faith, has really got strengthened, because I knew it was the right thing to do, but then I watched over the next year this new company like blow up all over the internet, and like you said, it was beautiful and glamorous and sexy and all the cool people involved, and it just looked like it was skyrocketing. And then it absolutely burnt and fell apart, and there was lawsuits and all kinds of things. And so I think my faith really got cultivated in that time of like, you can trust this knowing, even though you might immediately, like, kind of like Steve Jobs talks about, like intuition, and you can only connect the dots looking back. I think sometimes you'll make a decision that you know is true, but you may not see the fruits of that for a year, 2 years. And can you like just hold on to the faith and trust even when you haven't seen the external proof yet that that was the right decision? Does that make sense?
Totally. I mean, I love this is such a powerful message for everybody listening. And I'm like, I keep coming across this truth that we can never make sense of the pieces looking forward, and we can always make sense looking back. And so there's really like always this bigger picture in the making that's being forged. And I mean, I don't know what your human design is, but I'm a 6th sign, and someone gave me the analogy recently that it's like, you know, you're born and you're given this puzzle of thousands of puzzle pieces, but you've no idea what the final puzzle actually is. And so you're just trying to put it together. And we forget, like, even as adults, like our levels of consciousness are so primitive compared to our perceptive abilities and our potential. And so holding that trust and holding that faith, and even like surrendering, you know, that word used to terrify me, and I'm sure it'll scare some control freaks in the house. But really putting the little egoic me out of the way so that we can allow what wants to come through. I've been doing a lot of work with dreaming in the last few months, and, you know, bigger than my dreams and what I want to create and in the way that I want to create in the world, you know, I've been trying to just quiet that down to make space and be still and feel into what dream is dreaming me. And I'm curious, like, as you've matured on this path and you've got these nuggets of wisdom and this really bigger, beautiful relationship you've cultivated with the unknown, what do you feel your purpose is here? Like, what are you cultivating and transmitting?
Great question. Well, I would say, like on that topic, it is trust and faith in the bigger plan, and can I honor the steps that I'm being called to do day by day and be almost like obedient to that, even though I can't see the bigger picture and how it all comes together. And a really personal example of that I'll share, that feels really edgy for me to share actually, is because I would have said, and it still does feel to be true, that my biggest purpose is actually to be a mother. And this is like very real in the moment, but you know, it's like I'm really deep in prayer around this, and there's so many parts of me that really feel and know that's going to be true in time, but it's one of life's beautiful mysteries. You can't force that, you can't control that, you can't control the timing of that. And so I think part of what I'm more recently unraveling is my purpose is like, can we hold the vision of what we deeply feel in our hearts and know is true, keep moving forward, and like lean in and open our hearts and risk getting hurt, and hold the contrast of this is my desire and this is what I feel to be so true, and the vulnerability of like, I don't know when and how and if it will happen, but I'm going to keep moving forward, and I'm going to keep saying yes to what's ahead of me in the next step, and I'm going to keep evolving and showing up to the best of my ability. And it's such a beautiful, intimate dance between ourselves and that thing bigger than us. And that's my journey right now. And it is raw and it is real, and I've done it in so many other areas of life. But yeah, this point right now is like, you know, particularly I'm in the vulnerability of it right now.
I'm so grateful for you bringing your heart into our space and letting yourselves be felt. And I feel what you've just shared is going to be medicine for so many people. I mean, not later than this morning, I had one of my friends who had a baby maybe a year ago, just turned 1, and she's just finished her maternity leave, and she's just heading back to Big 4 company because her mat leave's over and she doesn't want to go back to that job, but she's just holding the space. And so many women are in the opposite situation where,
Mm,
they're looking at you and inspired by your professional trajectory, and they have the family piece in a different way. And
mm,
they're just really craving that self liberation and being free and channeling their energy in a way that actually makes a difference. And it's like, you don't even see what you've built, right? And it's like, you've done so much and you've achieved so much, and yet it's back to basics. And so it's really interesting to see how different all our journeys are. But also, you and I met in a high level mastermind, and it was not just a business mastermind, it was a love mastermind also.
mm.
And I've watched you go through so many initiations in love, and I've watched you keep like so centered on this path of, even when you met men who probably, I mean, if I'm speaking brutally honestly, relationships that most can only dream of, right? Like the level of devotion and care and attention and romance and excitement and connection and consciousness, because at this point there's a certain level of self-understanding that you have of your preferences and all the polarity work you've done. And so there was really like so many gorgeous opportunities that presented themselves to you that most people I know would have just gone with it because it was good enough, but you just stayed connected to the mother piece. And if that wasn't in that person's collective plans with you in the now, you just kept closing one door after another on these people. And I think like you hit the nail on the head by saying, like, faith is basically nothing other than believing in the unseen without any evidence that it's
Mm.
ever going to become visible, and then continuing to put one step in front of the other and chopping wood and carrying water no matter what, because you're just holding that vision. And that takes so much strength. And
Mm.
how do you do that? What's your secret for turning down one incredible opportunity after the other in service of this greater vision that you have for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's a beautiful question as well. And I think it's to me like about clarity as well of, again, what you feel like you're here for. Like, I know our purposes are like multi-layered, because I believe family and motherhood is part of my purpose, but there's a greater purpose as well. And I'm quite clear in like my beliefs around what's possible in a relationship. I think the shift that we're moving into around union and what's possible in relationship when two people are committed to this thing bigger than ourselves, again, above personal preferences. And I think there's an architecture or a technology in true union within relationship between a man and a woman. Not always, but for me, that is it. And having like God at the center of that, and what's possible in that dynamic, not only in terms of raising families, but in terms of serving the collective. That's something, again, that I've just internally had such a deep knowing about for several years. And I don't think it's something you just come across on Tinder like every second day. You know what I mean? Like I realize when you have a vision for something like that, it requires a lot of like internal work to be available for that. And yeah, it's almost like, and I have a lot of mentors and people that are an example of that. And so they're who I will learn from and take guidance from. And so, sometimes it might look good and be tempting to just kind of settle and be like, this is pretty good. But on a soul level, it's like, I can't give up on that knowing of what's possible in union, and the gift that is for, you know, the collective and families, and that's really what I deeply kind of know and feel. And then every time that I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just like, maybe this is good, you know, like I could, you know, I'll get a message or a reminder or a call from someone, or I'll see a post about a couple that have come together in this kind of union, and I'm like, it's that, like, that's the frequency of it, and it's like a reminder to just stay on course, stay with the vision, you know.
I can relate. It's like our human is so often wanting to just get that immediate gratification that's right here and available, and why bother when we can experience it all right now? And
Yeah.
this higher pull towards no, like I was put here for something bigger, and I'm not going to settle for less than my potential. So I love that, and I love the architecture and the vision of a couple. And I mean, not necessarily bringing a left wing slot, and we're going to have another conversation to maybe dive deeper into that. But this point around really being in service of something greater, and like different preferences in a relationship between what that means, and even men serving women and men serving, you know, a certain vision of the world and how it could be, has like been really illuminating for me. I'm really curious what you feel, because I felt so much resonance in my body when you were sharing that. What do you feel is possible in that structure?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about this a lot, and you know, and in transparency, I'm, you know, I'm in it. Like I'm really in this process at the moment. But I do think there's been quite a lot of inversions in
Mm.
world, you know, like I'm sure you talk about this a lot in structures and systems and how we work, and then also in the family unit and the role of men and women. And I feel like, you know, you and I behind the scenes in masterminds have talked about this, where, you know, women, the feminist movement was beautiful and had its important aspects and qualities to that, to empower women. But on the other side of that, I think sometimes it went too far. And for me particularly, and I think a lot of women, there's this call back to like, cool, yes, I have my business and my passion, but how do I really rest into my biological value as a woman? And similar for men in different ways. Like I think their role, you know, has shifted and changed, and you know, their provider protector role has, you know, and then there's like Me Too movements and all kinds of things that have had men kind of the masculine principle kind of diluted. And so I think we're in this really interesting time, both as men and women, of returning to our biological nature and like this natural law that actually has a beautiful design within that. And so that's been a lot of my journey, is returning to that nature, my true nature within a role as a feminine biological woman, and owning that and being really in approval of that. And then I have really noticed the men I'm attracting is very different and beautiful, and they're very masculine and in that role. So I think on a bigger scale, there's this recalibration happening. And then when that comes together in its really natural form, again, of service to something bigger than their individual preferences, like we're here to serve something bigger, and we're in harmony with that. I think we get to see a love and a depth that holds not only family units, because there's a lot of attack on the family unit, even in terms of crazy working hours and all kinds of things. But I think we get to restore the family unit, and kids get to grow up in healthy, loving environments where, you know, a lot of adults spend so much time unpacking their childhood. If we start to create beautiful environments for children to grow up that is healthy, we don't have to spend our lives rewriting that. So I think there's a lot of power in that family unit. And then I also feel like the love that gets fortified in these unions becomes like a real beacon for communities. And through that union, and a purpose that serves, I feel it's hugely impactful, the ripple out effect that can have.
Wow. And I mean, I'm feeling what you're saying, and there's so much there. And at a personal level, I mean, I have a lot of women in my life, very incredible, successful, expansive women, and most of them want nothing more than a masculine man to hold them and
Mm-hmm.
just to be held. And I feel like, I mean, even I have personally been on a journey of softening. And I think the more we get into our hearts, the more we just want that space where all of us can be held, not just this boxed, really presentable version. And, being feminine is being soft, but it's also being primal and being raw and being, all of the expressions that we hold, and having someone who can meet us there is really, really, really important. And especially for people who are like pioneering movements in the world, who are leading massive organizations at a global level, or countries or communities, like for all those people, having a partner by your side to hold you in that creation is really important. Like we talk about having mentors. I mean, I'm so fed by my relationships. I could never do what I'm doing if I were completely isolated and felt on my own. And so I feel like we're looking to find a level of integration within ourselves, of masculine and feminine, of softness and, action, but we're also really exponentially more powerful when we, give up our individual selves and then are part of a whole that's much greater than the sum of our individual parts.
Mm.
Hmm.
Beautifully summarized.
So I have a few questions for you.
Fire away.
What truth, right? We're pretty big on truth over here. What truth do you wish more leaders would finally wake up to? Or in light of our conversation, more men would finally wake up
to? Beautiful. Well, I think the truth is, it's two ways. Like when we're talking about union and relationship and the power of relationship, I think it's easy probably for the women to be like, we're the masculine men that can hold us. And the men are probably over there being like, we're the soft feminine women that just like, we can just cherish and like step into. I think probably both, but both of us, I think the truth is that it's a really important time for us to get on the same page. And not on the same page as in like we see things the same way. I think biologically and our wiring, we actually see things in a very different way. And that is part of the work, is to understand the opposite sex and be in approval of the maleness in men, and the men being in the softness and the rawness and all of it of the feminine, and really understanding the opposite sex and how we naturally complement, and how we can get on the same page by understanding each other and what each other need to be at our best in our given nature. And I think that is the invitation. And then when you work with that foundation, then you've got something really strong to go and take on the world. But first, I think it starts, here in the relating and the communication.
What do you feel is the biggest barrier right now in the way of that?
I mean, I do think society isn't really geared for women. I mean, I'm sure men as well, but there are a lot of things at play that keep us so busy and distracted. Like, even if you look at like working, like a relationship is the most important. Your primary intimate relationship is the most important choice you're going to make, because it's going to affect everything in your life, the biggest influence in your life. And yet I feel so, we get, if we're working 60-hour weeks and we're like doing all this, whatever we're doing, it's like, I think there's a lot that distracts us from having the time and space to create those foundations of what's necessary in a relationship. So I think, a lot of distraction, a lot of inversion about what women are expected to do and be. I think women feel like they have to be and do everything these days rather than like rest into their nature. And biologically, women are wired for family first, and then, the business, but getting that order right. And similarly for men, I think culturally, they've been like, testosterone levels are low these days. Like, there's a lot of things that are against men being in their full expression of masculinity. The world's kind of numbed that down or made that unsafe or dangerous, where I think we actually need to invite that leadership and directness and like warrior energy. Like, we need to invite that back, not like make that bad or unsafe and try and like dim that down. So I think there's things both sides.
So many people in functional society are living neck up, completely disconnected from their bodies. And I think, you're absolutely right. Like, there's so many distractions in place. I mean, I personally was on the contraceptive pill for 10 years. Like, I'm still, the more I'm connecting to my womb and connecting to my body and learning about just the power that is underneath my neck in living my life, the more I realize like the atrocities that were put through just a lack of education, a lack of information, a lack of perceived appearances of things and choices. But even for men, I mean, in order to kind of start to move in the right direction, it feels like we need to get away from the virtual reality that gets created in our thinking mind, and then the objectifying and materialistic metrics that all these systems are like built to support, and instead really support people in reconnecting to their power in their bodies.
Yeah.
And then we're back to, full circle to your point around intuition. What are keys or one of your favorite frameworks or codes that you have for that pathway in order for you to get lower into your body and find that state of flow, find your deeper intelligence, and move from that deeper wisdom?
Yeah, for sure. I think being connected to our bodies is a huge part of it, and being in like unplugging from, like you said, the virtual matrix. It's like constantly feeding us, whatever it's feeding us and whatever you're plugging into. So like being in nature, I think, is a huge piece for us to do as often as possible, because we're talking about being in your true nature. Like, nature is that. It helps kind of strip away and us to feel more connected. Definitely being in our bodies, obviously eating well and things like that. But especially for women, well, and men, it's like our dropping into our bodies, breathing, being in nature, like coming back to ourselves and feeling, especially as women, feeling what's on our hearts, expressing the raw truth of what's on our hearts, because that is also what allows men to feel and step up and lean in. Because if we're just like talking from our heads, men don't have the capacity to feel in the way that women do, and that is like a source of aliveness and life for men. So as women, when we are able to drop into our bodies and our wombs and hearts and feel like what's here, what's alive, what's true, and express that, that's when men can respond to that as well. So that's that's a big piece of our vulnerability and receptivity and superpower. But also that helps us tap into our intuition more, because if we're like suppressing everything and we've got all these stored emotions in our body and we're like trying to like think our way through things, like we're not going to be able to hear that quiet whisper, and that is where the subtle wisdom is. And that's where you make one move that is tenfold, you know, what your brain's trying to tell you to do, which is like the same it's always done, really. So yeah, that's what I'd say. And yeah, men just being in their bodies. And I think that's a way, I think men connect differently, but being in their primality, I think is a big piece for men as well, because sometimes they need to move energy, but maybe not in the same way that we do.
Yeah. So much of the work I stand for is about feeling and being felt and deepening our abilities and perceptions to actually do that. And I loved what you were doing with your body around the tension, because a portal is relaxation, right? Like a portal is to relax. And how many people do you know that are just really just completely relaxed and fluid in the way they move and the way they show up? Not many in high functioning society. And you know, you kept saying getting back to your body and connecting to your body, but that might mean zero to someone who doesn't know how to do that. So what would you tell those people, and how did you learn to feel? How do you feel your feelings?
Yeah. I mean, I would also say, like you said, if you've spent 25, 30, 40 years not connected to your body, it takes a minute. It takes some time. That's what I found. Like, I also was on contraception and for a while and didn't have a cycle for 5 years as a woman. This was many years ago now. And so when I had to take some space and like let it all, like, I actually lived in nature. I don't suggest you do this, but like I lived in nature for like 6 months, and just let a lot fall away on its own. So I would say, like, it's making time. It's giving yourself space to unplug from busyness, which can be just a distraction and a trauma response often, but actually giving your space to do nothing, because that can be highly uncomfortable for some people. So time to rest, time to go for walks in nature, and work with someone. If you're really disconnected from your body, you probably need to work with someone who can guide you into the feeling realm. And sometimes once you take the lid off that, you're like, oh, okay, there's a lot there that I didn't know about, which was the case for me. And now I like pretty easily access my emotions in real time. And I think, so I'd say nature, giving yourself space and moving your body, because we store a lot in the body. Like Pilates, yoga, dancing, whatever, moving the body. And if you really feel disconnected, working with someone who has a really strong grasp on the emotional felt space, so that you can access the deep wisdom that is there and what your emotions are trying to tell you.
So good. And I love that you reminded people that it can take a minute if it's not been your default. I have a client this week who basically freaked that this was therapy and why are we not moving faster? And there's just so much that happened. And it's because there's so much resistance to slow down and so much resistance to actually facing the truth and looking at ourselves in the mirror, and the feeling that it's not productive and it's not useful and it's taking us away from wherever we're trying to go. And actually it's so additive, because it's like truly like the definition of slowing down to speed up. And I know, because all I've been doing is healing, and it feels my whole life is just healing. And yet my business is growing at a faster rate than I would have ever imagined. And it's really like the outside world catching up with the identity shifts that you're breaking through and who you're becoming. So there's really a piece around faith here that, you know, if you're courageous enough to do it, and if you trust that as you let those feelings through, instead of them being blocked in your body, you're letting them out. And so you're liberating yourself in order to make space to decide what you actually are and want and decide, and maybe even bigger than you, to our, you know, purpose conversation. So I think it's so important. I'm so grateful to have heard you really, really hone that home. I have a couple more questions, and then we can just whatever way you see best. Something that like keeps coming through is, what invisible work do you do behind the scenes that people don't really see, but that you feel are really game changing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think one of my superpowers, like I relate to you when you were saying, you know, you do healing work and then your business just expands. Like I do quite a lot of invisible work, if you will, that gives unexplainable kind of business results. So I am big on, like, I mean, it sounds kind of weird and wild, but I go for prayer walks in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Or I pray, but more recently, like prayer walks, because it's first thing in the morning. I didn't get to do it this morning because I was on early for this call, so I will go after this call. But going for a walk in your environment, seeing sunlight in your eyes first thing, like what we're letting into our eyes, especially first thing in the morning, is really important. So I'll let light in, and then I really like go on prayer walks, and it's like a dialogue with life and with God, and it's real and it's honest. It's like if I'm chatting to you, it's like, cool, like, you know, is there anything that I need to see? Like, is there anything that I've, you know, not kind of like repent, but like, you know, is there anything I could have done better yesterday? Was there places that I slipped up or slipped into my humanness or my own personal preferences over what is best and what is highest? And like, I'll reflect on that. And then I'm always inquiring, like, yeah, what is the highest calling? What is that next step? So I'm always realigning every day, giving myself or others for anything. So there's this like, process, I guess, of like cleaning the slate every morning. Like, what can I forgive from the day before? What can I clean up? What show me, like, were there any little behaviors that were like not in alignment with who I'm becoming and what I'm here to serve? And then, what is that vision? What am I being called to? Reconnecting with that. And then like, what does that look like in my day to day? What steps would I be taking? What actions am I making? And even if it is like, oh, I don't really want to do that, it's like, that's the thing. So it's I would say a prayer walk. If there's anything in life that is challenging or a problem, I'll pray on it and you know, ask. I used to ask a lot more for clarity, and these days I ask to see clearly. I believe it's already there. The answers are there. Anything we pray for, I do believe, ask and you'll receive. But sometimes we're not clear enough. We're not open enough. We're not seeing clearly to receive what it is that we're praying for. So I actually tend to not say, like, give me clarity. It's like, I know it's here. Like, give me eyes to see clearly. Give me a heart that can feel and like see the truth in this situation. And then I find, like, throughout my day, you know, there'll always be something that's magical and obvious, and I'm like, oh, this was the answer to that prayer, or this is the next step. So I find if I set my day up that way, a lot of magic can unfold throughout the day.
I love that answer so much. I love so many things about it. I love the consistency and the habitual practice of it. And it's like, it almost doesn't matter what your practice to connect is, as long as you do it, not just when things aren't okay. And I think
Yes.
that's really the key. Like, so many people like resort to prayer or like connecting to something higher when they're in shit, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
save me, send me this. And it's like, this
Yeah.
shit's not working. It's like, it's not a hotline.
Yeah. It's not.
The relationship all
Yeah.
the time. And so there was really a connection to that space. And what came to me when you were talking about quantum growth in your business is like, yeah, that's the God zone. That's like you being in that flow state. And it doesn't make any sense when we're living there, but it's so felt. And you're not showing up as a disempowered entity asking for saving,
Yeah.
like you're
Yeah.
playing around. I want to see clearly. I've got the answers. Is like really power meets power. And it's
Mm.
like you're really connecting to yourself at a just very deep level. And then, it's like the seer is the eye of the storm. If we can be the witness of our own experience, and we all have that capacity, no matter what our spiritual or faith beliefs are, we're all able to witness ourselves living our lives. Like consciousness has this property that you could be watching a movie, and if the movie's good enough, like 20 minutes in, you forget and you're just so absorbed and nothing else is real. And so we're able to take the properties of what we do. And so this human game is a game of remembering. And so you remembering first thing what your power is, and first thing who you are, and first thing where you're self-deluding in order to stay the course. Like, of course, you were able to make all these courageous, hard choices that have led you to where you are now. And yeah, it's really, really inspiring. And I'm sure you've given people many ideas on how to take that home and work with that. I have one more question, and then I want to just spend the last 5 minutes on whatever you want, and you can take it wherever. And like, really, it's more of a practical one. It's like if you were to give CEOs, entrepreneurs, any leader in transition right now, one shift that they could implement on anything at all, like you choose the context, what would it be and why?
So they're going through a transition, like a tool that they can use to help in that transition?
Not necessarily. Like,
No.
what do you, Sarah, would love people who are leading communities forward and going through some transformation on their evolutionary path? What would you love them to know and have and maybe implement in their life?
I would say like a real gift in leadership, especially when you have communities that you're serving and you're going through your own evolution, is to actually share and be vulnerable when you don't have it all figured out all the time. Because you're probably surprised how many people put you on a pedestal sometimes when you're in a leadership position and think that you just like have all the answers and like, like you're like, yeah, we're going this way. And actually the periods where you don't know and you're, and often when you share like just the truth of where you're at, and that's not to say like, oh my God, I've got no idea what's happening. And like, like there's a way to show vulnerability where you're still solid in yourself because you trust that, and you've probably done it enough times to know that something always comes through and lands on the other side and it's bigger and better than where you are now. But sometimes to share a bit, let people a bit in on your journey. I've found that everything is felt anyway, right? Like everyone is so tapped in, and sometimes by naming the current reality as it is actually makes people feel really safe, trust you more, and understand their own experience better and give language and voice to things they might be feeling but can't articulate. And so, yeah, I would say there's two things I've done in leadership is acknowledge current reality and the truth of that. And then also say, and this is like how I'm moving forward. And this is, what I do know, because that orientation is a creative orientation. And it actually helps people feel really safe, really trusting you, that you're not covering anything up or trying to be something you're not. And it also anchors you in, and I'm here and I'm showing up, and this is what I do know about where we're going and what we're moving towards. And yeah, I think that really is very magnetic in leadership.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a trait that you embody really well. Permission to be raw and messy, and just owning truth is there. There's nothing more powerful than owning truth. And I tell this to my clients all the time. I think many of them still don't believe me, but when they say to me, "I don't know," like I feel like those are the magic three words. It's like when we admit not knowing something, we finally exhausted that like puppy in our minds that's like this conscious, super hyperactive, overthinking cognitive mind. And instead we're developing a bridge to much deeper level of intelligence that we have. And our unconscious mind's running the show anyway. We may well make it not a problem that we don't know. I mean, I often joke like, hire a board member and bring a seat at the table for the unknown, and consider that as a persona consciously. If you want to go bigger than you are, if you want to go faster, if you want to create things that don't make sense, because reality and limitless possibilities and the field of potentiality lives there. If we knew the level of consciousness we're operating in doesn't have that. So
yeah. And the crazy thing is like that I don't know, the unknown. When I talk about intuition, it's the access point for your intuition, like your deep intuition. The ironic thing is it in no sense. Like that's what I train people to get into a state of in no sense. It doesn't make sense to your conscious mind. That is actually the doorway to intuition. So the I don't know is a state I actually practice getting clients into.
yes.
To then know.
Yes.
That intuitive knowing, that deeper level of knowing. So it's like this ironic thing as a leader that we have to hold that contradiction of like not knowing is the gateway to knowing.
Yeah, but it's not contradictory at all, right? Like
No.
it's just our natural state. If we watch like any newborn baby,
Exactly.
like the way they are, like their cognition hasn't developed yet, but it precedes the verbal, and it's much more powerful. So I think there's a returning to where we came from.
Totally. If we could all be more childlike.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing all the wisdom with us. Is there anything else in your heart and your intuition that you'd like to bring before we end today?
Well, I just feel really incredibly grateful. Like, even though I can't see all the faces or people tuning in, like I can feel the collective energy of what this is. And I'm so grateful for you for hosting these spaces, because I think it is different and unique in this world of like AI, and everyone can like put in their little like, questions and map out entire businesses off chat GPT. And I feel like creating spaces where we can slow down, connect, talk about like very real things of navigating leadership and life and love is what's needed. And so very grateful for this space, very grateful for you bringing this together and everyone that's joined in. And my message would just be like, listen to the quiet and listen to the little whispers inviting you on the next adventure, because that's really where life gets beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful you're here. You were in my membership last month, and we're testing the waters together. So you're really part of this movement, and I feel like you're such a sister, and I'm in awe of your path and your wisdom and your resilience. And yeah, I feel we need so much more of these raw human fireside conversations that nobody feel they ever have time to have or feel safe enough to have or make space to have. And it feels like a privilege to be able to bring that to the public. Like, I feel I've had these conversations behind closed doors in my communities for years now, and this is my first time really lifting the door, other than like, you know, all the speakers or, you know, interviews where I've been interviewed. This is my first public space that I'm hosting. So it feels like a really beautiful start. I'm so grateful you came. We have a second episode where you'll have all the power and you'll
Yes, I can't wait.
other direction. And until then, yeah, if you're listening, thank you so much for like trusting us and giving us your time and your energy. We're going to be learning as we go here. My team's going to look at like the comments. We figured out the tech today, which is like incredible. And if there's any feedback, any questions, any reflections, let us know. Sarah and I will be back. I think it's in 2 weeks, but like just sign up to the next event. There's going to be another event on LinkedIn. And yeah, we'll see you guys really soon. Thank you for tuning in. Have an amazing weekend, everybody.